Hello and a warm welcome to the CNBC Africa Special. I'm Gugulethu Cele, coming to you live from Cape Town. Now, this is where the current Open Government Partnership Africa Regional Conference is currently in session. Now, the reason why we gathered here today is because of this particular agreement which has taken place between several governments coming together to ensure that they encourage each other to move towards more transparent, more cultural, or rather client-centric as well as a civil society-centric approaches to ensuring that they enhance the abilities of their citizens and meet their approaches as well as respond to their aspirations. Now, over the next 60 minutes, we're going to delve into this conversation by understanding how we can implement open government partnership strategies in such a manner that is sustainable for African economies. And now more than ever, it's important for us to have this conversation as the African continent continues to have several clouds over it with regard to good governance, illicit financial flows, corruption, as well as the harm, as well as disregard for human rights. But that's what we're going to unpack over the next 60 minutes with my esteemed level of panelists who will be sharing their opinions, their views, as well as suggestions on best practice policies that we can implement to ensure that these merge not only with the Sustainable Development Goals, but also with the Agenda 2063. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to welcome our wonderful level of panelists who will be taking this conversation forward. To my left, the Honourable Minister of Environmental Affairs in the Republic of South Africa, Ms. Edna Molewa. Representing the African Development Bank Special Envoy on Gender, Mrs. Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi.
Good morning.
The Chairperson of the African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights, Advocate Pensi Tlagola.
Good morning.
Representing civil society from the World Wide Web Foundation, Ms. Nwa-kan-ma.
Hello.
The Ambassador of the Open Government Partnership, Dr. Mo Ibrahim, and the Chief Executive of NEPAD, Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki. Now, we are not alone. We have a wonderful audience made up of government ministers, officials, dignitaries, as well as delegates from across the continent and the globe, who too will be participating in this conversation by sharing their thoughts, views, and opinions on this conversation in the next hour. You too at home can participate, including the individuals on the room, or in the room rather, by making use of social media platforms and the following hashtag OGP. Africa 2016, OGP Africa 2016, and we look forward to some of the views that you might present going forward. But to set the tone and to get the conversation going, which promises to be quite lively given the opinions that will be shared by some of our panelists today, I gather that given the fact that we are all here in the room, we all find that open government policies and partnerships is a critical matter, one that is of utmost importance to the African continent in particular. Honourable Minister, if I can perhaps start off with you by taking us back to 2011, where South Africa was one of the founding countries when it came to the establishment of open government partnerships. If we reflect on how far we've come, as well as some of the lessons learned with regard to policies that we've implemented or ideas regarding national action plans, how do we fare and what can we help our colleagues with on the rest of the continent?
Well, thank you very much, Gugulethu, and audience. Let me first of all start by once again welcoming you, as the Minister has already done, but just to also share with you that to start with, South Africa as a democratic state has actually been founded on the rights of the people and popular participation by the people right from the onset. And therefore, we have always had this outreach, people participation, and so forth. But since we joined the OGP in 2011, as the Minister earlier on indicated, that just elaborated on what we have been able to do, we have actually been able to submit our report, and we have had plans in place, the independent review mechanism that we submitted in 2013. We have also been working on some of the programs like your African Peer Review Mechanism, which actually is a very elaborate program where so civil society, everybody, business, and so on, actually participates in issues of sustainability and sustainable development. It's mainly focusing even on ensuring that our democracy does continue to live and we lead, and the society is participating and well engaged in the entire process of policy making and so forth. We've also been participating and ensuring that there's engagement and involvement of our people in the formulation of the Sustainable Development Goals. As you know, the UN has actually adopted those Sustainable Development Goals. Why am I bringing in Sustainable Development Goals as an example is because these are very broad goals in the society that encompasses right from a socio-economic and actually even all aspects of development, environment included as well. So they're all encompassing, and all our people have actually been participating, engaging in these discussions so that then there can be a broader discussion. We've also provided our people with free Wi-Fi in some of the cities already for openness, for them to be able to engage with our society. So the list is endless, and I'm saying that at a preliminary level, I just want to share that as South Africa, we are actually committed to open governance and openness and transparency. As a matter of fact, we've been dealing with things like corruption throughout the society. There are open lines at presidential level. There is a hotline where anybody and everybody can actually report on whatever you see or hear happening. And there's been real action that has been taken, and some of the numbers and statistics are available on actions that have been taken already on some of the wrongdoers that we have found in the system. So indeed, we are engaging and we are committed and we remain committed. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You touched on the Sustainable Development Goals, and perhaps I'd like to go to Dr. Mayaki towards the end. To get your perspective, NEPAD, I understand, fundamental and critical in the role of ensuring that Sustainable Development Goals will be monitored with regard to the implementation on the African continent. How do these tie in with open government policy and objectives?
Well, I'm very pleased to be here, really, and honored. Three quick issues. The Sustainable Development Goals were a negotiation process where each continent came with a position. Africa was the only continent that came with a common African position based on Agenda 2063. So when we talk about the implementation of the SDGs, we'll apply the same monitoring and evaluation mechanisms that we apply in the implementation of Agenda 2063, which means that the reporting will be unique. On Agenda 2063 reporting, the reporting on Agenda 2063 will be the same reporting that we'll do on the SDGs, and NEPAD agency has been tasked to do that monitoring and evaluation. Now, the second point in relation to the open government issues, interest, specific domains, there are two critical issues that I would like to raise. The first one is the SDGs and Agenda 2063 put the emphasis on the development of productive capacities. Productive capacities are linked to human capital development. And human capital development will be for foundation for most of the things that we'll have to do in infrastructure, agriculture, etc. And it links directly to a youth strategy. What we have learned in the last 10 years, 15 years, I mean, through our interventions on the ground, is that policies, in order to be efficiently implemented, can no longer be designed in a top-down process. It has to be a combination of top-down and bottom-up. And if you take that approach, necessarily transparency has to exist because data has to be shared. So the quality of the data is important, and we are working very strongly on that. The second issue is that implementation, which used to be looked at as a technical issue done by experts, has to be opened in the real sense of a word, so that it is not the monopoly of experts, but it is a partnership with non-state actors, etc. And this is why the combination of a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach is a guarantee for the quality of implementation when implementation is open to all actors. And that's the only way where we'll be really efficient in terms of attaining the goals of Agenda 2063 and the SDGs.
What I'm understanding here is that there's a lot of cohesiveness. We're hearing about the Sustainable Development Goals, we're hearing about open governance, and naturally, Agenda 2063. Mrs. Moleketi, perhaps I can come to you here, and Advocate Hlakola, you can also share your sentiments here, but let's focus first with regard to Agenda 2063. Strong focus on women as well as youth empowerment here, given the fact that 75% of Africa's population is under the age of 35. How do you view open government policies aligning with Agenda 2063 to be able to roll out the active participation with regard to transparency and citizen activeness in this particular regard?
Let me start out with the point that the whole issue of inclusive growth is quite central. We've heard Dr. Mayaki talk about the whole issue of the SDGs, the Agenda 2063, inclusive participation, looking at policy making differently, and I think this is quite central. When you look at Agenda 2063, there's a priority area that very specifically looks at the empowerment of women and girls, and looking at their being provided equal access in all spheres of life. And I think if you look at a population where 2/5 of the unemployed unemployed population is youth, very clearly there's a challenge on how we're going to overcome that. And we need to ensure that all our policies are so structured that it does result in job creation for women and for youth on this continent. And creating the numbers of jobs required is difficult. I know you said Agenda 2063, and you spoke about what does open government mean. We're looking at it in terms of inclusive policy making, but we also want to say, and this is where I want to challenge Dr. Mayaki as well, that when we look at infrastructure development, and we're involved in that as the African Development Bank, that infrastructure rollout has to be inclusive. And in many instances, you find people saying, but a road is a road is a road. Building a city is building a city, but it's not to be viewed in that way. We're saying bring in the women who are seen as living infrastructure at this point in time. They are the ones who carry water for homes. They are the ones who carry firewood to ensure that food is cooked in homes and all. And this needs to be changed. So the infrastructure should be such that when a road is built, there's a road economy around it. It's linked with feeder roads where you are able to ensure that in northern Ghana, where it took people 4 hours to get from their homes to a hospital, after building a road, it took them 1 hour. The potable water in Ghana, in that area, is available now, whereas previously about 90% more people were afflicted by guinea worm disease. That has changed. And again, I'm spreading it out, but this is what 2063 is about. This is what we'd like to see open government about, ensuring that our policies and programs that we implement are such that include everyone in communities, women, girls, young men, boys, and that we see the development required. The last point that I do want to make, that to ensure this and to meet the aspirations of women and youth, there's really a need for leadership at all levels of society, political, the private sector, and in civil society, that's single-minded in focus and ensure that we achieve results. Because as Dr. Mayaki said, results is not just for the technicians, it's for all of us, and that there is sufficient foresight to evolve solutions for the challenges of tomorrow.
I'm not too sure how a lot of the female audience members must be feeling. A lot of confidence given the fact that there is more female representation on the panel versus men. So perhaps that shows that we are making progress to inclusive growth. No offense, though, to our two gentlemen who are doing a great job representing us as well. But before I come to you, Dr. Ibrahim, to another female advocate, Kakola, perhaps if we can also engage us with regard to the 2063 vision. As we've heard from your colleague on the panel, strong focus again on women as well as the youth, but overall, human rights are still a key priority because that affects everybody in the room here too.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here. In 2063, we want a prosperous, integrated, and peaceful Africa, a continent characterized by human rights, good governance, democracy, justice, and the rule of law. And frankly speaking, my view is that for as long as a secrecy permeates our institutions, for as long as there is opaqueness in public institutions, we will never be able to achieve what we have set to achieve in 2063. So in my view, what we need to do is to put the right of access to information at the center of achieving openness. And we can only do that by institutionalizing openness through the adoption of access to information laws on our continent. And we should not simply adopt these laws as a tick box exercise, which tends to happen in some of our countries. So from my perspective as the Special Rapporteur on Freedom of Expression and Access to Information in Africa, together with our civil society partners, we have made a small contribution. We have been crisscrossing this continent, trying to encourage state parties to the African Charter to adopt access to information laws, because we think that it is only through the adoption of these laws and their effective implementation that we can achieve openness. And in order to be helpful in that regard, we drafted the model law on access to information in Africa, which was adopted by the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, a commission on which I serve. And this law, this model law, has been used by most of our countries on the continent to fashion their access to information laws. And we have been able, in a period of 3 years, to increase the number of countries with access to information laws from 5 to 18. The road is still long, because we then have to ensure that there is effective implementation, because the right of access to information is a cross-cutting right. Can never be able to enjoy social economic rights, the right to vote, transparency, good governance, all the rights. Central to the enjoyment of those rights is, of course, the right of access to information.
Precisely. On the topic of access to information, we know that on the continent, though, according to a GSMA report, mobile internet penetration at 2014 sat at 20%. In the year 2020, it's expected to increase to 38%, where the global comparison will be 48%. The power of the internet is something that has been proven on the internet, or rather on the African continent. If you take a look at local protests from a South African perspective, being Fees Must Fall, the success of Ushahidi in Kenya, which has also been replicated in developed economies like the USA, and not forgetting the Arab Spring that we also saw a few years back. All of that empowered by sharing of information and using the internet as a tool. I'd like to turn to another female who describes herself on media platforms as saying that she's from the internet. She's a millennial and one who understands that it's imperative that we get access to that information to empower civil society as well, to enhance the development of open government. Nwa-kan-ma, Ms. Nwa-kan-ma, I'd like to come to you to get your perspective with regard to this, the role of civil society, this access to information, and using tools such as technology and innovation to help us leapfrog, as well as fully and firmly establish open government partnerships on the continent.
Thank you. Confession, I've been tweeting while I'm here because I need to be connected. I just want to push forward from Advocate Pansidla-Kula. Access to information is no longer complete without access to broadband internet connection. It's one pack now. So when I speak access, I actually mean access to information and access to broadband internet connection, because the two, coupled with the respect of rights online and offline, and openness in data and information, come together to give us a participatory development from civil society. So if we don't have access, if we don't have a respect to human rights, if we don't have participation, then we cannot have an open government that allows people to participate. So how can civil society, in its own way, partner with government? The question was on new ways. Let's speak about what the internet offers us. Dr. Mayaki, 2063 is too far from now. It's 47 years from now, and half this assembly will not be around.
Are we sure? Let's hope there's some potions or we find that fountain of youth.
I wish you long life, but that is also the truth, okay? So we are looking at stuff that can happen in the next 3, 4, 5 years. To begin with, new ways of doing things. In those days, we used to carry files from table to table. I don't know how many Africans want to fill papers anymore. So please, let's make use of the opportunities that internet connectivity gives us to work together, to meet online, to contribute, and to participate. So if we want the civil society to really be part of this, we need to invest more on their capacity to participate. In the olden days, we used to meet face to face, but now we shouldn't be doing that. And as he has said, implementation should be by expertise, but expertise is no longer with one part of the stakeholders. There is expertise in the industry, there is expertise within civil society. So we are looking at an OGP that is driven by expertise wherever expertise is found. In my world of the internet, things sometimes go the other way around. In the beginning, parents used to teach their children. In 2.0 life, children are teaching their parents. And that is okay as long as they know where we are going. Let me pause here to say that OGP is a big word that sometimes we say in nice conference centers like Century Center. But the man on the street does not know what OGP is. What he wants to know is the price of plantain in Côte d'Ivoire and the price of a kilogram of potatoes in Cape Town. And to an extent, for those of us who travel a lot, how much my ticketing costs. And for somebody like me, what I want to know is if I'm coming to South Africa, that I can apply for my visa online, that I can submit my papers online, that Home Affairs can send me a visa online, which Colombia did last week. What I cannot take is that a great country like South Africa will make me spend 3 working days looking for a visa for 7 days to come for this meeting and issue me that visa 2 days after the conference is over. It's not good. It's not good, people. Why are OGP countries not giving us the greater example? I can hop into Kigali and as an African and pay for my visa on arrival and get some work done. I work 12 to 14 hours a day. I need OGP countries to show that my work is being appreciated in this country. And let us use the opportunities that internet gives us. We want to do things in a different way, but we want to do things in a way that profits all of Africa.
Before we move to your colleague next to you, I'd like to have a follow-up there, and perhaps actually come to Dr. Ibrahim. Perhaps give us insights. You want to follow up there?
Suggestion from my sister.
Yes, sir.
The easiest way to get a South African visa is to get a British passport or American passport. You get visa on arrival.
No.
But if you are African, you cannot get a visa.
I'm originally Nigerian, and I live in Côte d'Ivoire. I'm happy being an African. I want to live in this continent. I want to work in this continent. I don't want to wait till 2063 for Africa to be rich. My children won't be poor my grandchildren won't be poor. I don't want to be treated that way. I want to be a happy African, and this is my continent.
Would you like to? I'm happy that you've actually brought it up,
So,
because perhaps
yeah.
we can get a response from some of the panelists regarding
well,
solutions
so
here.
if my sister doesn't want a British passport,
No, I don't want to migrate. I love my continent.
Can we ask the South African government really to treat Africans as well as they treat Europeans and Americans? Is that a reasonable request?
Dr. Ibrahim, I'd like to give the Minister an opportunity to respond, because fundamentally here we're also trying to source solutions. So we understand what the challenges are, and very clearly so, and even methods how to bypass some of the challenges. But what about the implementable solutions? I'll start with the Honourable Minister, then go to Dr. Mayaki, and perhaps Nena, as a representative of civil society, together with Dr. Ibrahim as well, if we can source these solutions as to how to make it easier for governments, not only to make it easy to access their countries, but access regions, such as the example we've seen with the East African communities with their uni-passport. Honourable Minister?
I honestly deliberately started by reminding all of us that South Africa has been an open society and a democratic society since our democratic dispensation and inception. Why so? Because it is important to recognize that we do not say people should not come to South Africa. And as a matter of fact, we do have quite a number of non-South Africans here in South Africa, living here now as we speak. Legal and illegal, they are here. And as a matter of fact, we are also a country that has got to ensure that we meet all requirements from a security point of view, from social point of view, and ensure that there's a balance between all these things. So South Africa is currently, like the country that my sister indicated, actually putting in place our online system, and that is going to be a biometrics. It's already inserted in some of the airports and here. Biometrics of checking, so that from a security point of view, we also become accountable to our people, and that's quite important. It's not as if we are not going to have it. We are having it, we are putting it. It's just that it's taking quite some time because we're faced with many challenges. I did say that we're giving our people free Wi-Fi. Our Minister of ICT has spent 2 weeks somewhere in Europe with other African ministers, by the way, not alone, working on installation of the spectrum, how we will ensure that the spectrum is grown on the African continent for our people, because we can talk about access. What do you access if it is not there? They're spending that time there to ensure that there is provision of that kind of infrastructure, not only in South Africa, but on the continent. And that would also be an infrastructure that helps us to provide the growth of this registration of whatever we want, be it visas, be it whatever, be it e-education, be it e-governance, and all that we are actually moving into. Thank you.
Dr. Mayaki? Advocate Kakula, and then Dr. Mayaki?
Yeah, as a person who travels throughout the continent, I echo those sentiments. I mean, 2063 talks about an integrated Africa where there will be free movement. And I think we have to strive towards that ideal, because it is indeed that some of us who travel on the continent, we don't experience as many problems as some of our brothers and sisters who come to our country experience. So I just want to put that on the table as something that the South African government has to look at.
Dr. Mayaki, your response?
Yes, it would be an error to say that 2063 is too far. For one simple reason. It is an agenda about regional integration. And regional integration is not short-term. Now, the issue is how this long-term agenda will be implemented. That's the issue. It's not the agenda or the 50-year perspective of horizon. It's how it will be implemented. And it will, first of all, in parentheses, the agenda was perfectly reflecting the principles of open government because it was designed bottom-up. Now, that said, in the implementation, we'll have 10-year segments that will be used as learning processes in order to push forward. So it means that after a 10-year period of implementation, on the basis of a feedback, which will not come from the experts only, that can be reviewed. But it is very important that Africa has a long-term strategy, because the main reason, one of the main reasons, why Africa was marginalized is that all the other regions had long-term strategies and were dealing with short-term issues and without a vision which could structure our actions.
I think just to add to that, it's the whole issue of ensuring that we have our own Marshall Plan. So we've got to have a framework that is long-term, and as was indicated by Dr. Mayaki, having the shorter-term goals. But Nena's right as well. We want to see the low-hanging fruit within that. And this is where the issue that's been raised around migration and regional integration is so important, because a lot of the inclusive development and growth in Africa is about our mobility across the African continent. And I think that we really need to take forward. I think a last point, Nena, that I want to take up that you've raised, you spoke about what is online, and you said the price of bread and all. But you would recall, because I think we are cohabiting in one country at this point in time, that there was a number of young people who came to a hackathon weekend. And the big issue as well is about jobs. So we want to have the blueprint for the continent to have the goals that's going to turn around the unemployment levels and poverty eradication on the continent, but for the women and girls. And the challenge to OGP is ensure that as we take this forward, that the transparency that's there, that the accountability from everyone covers everyone on the continent. It's not just for one segment of the continent.
If I may come in there, we do have about 2 minutes left before we go to an ad break. Dr. Ibrahim, I'd like to come to you. You're well known for being vocal with regard to governance, as well as ensuring that African countries cooperate efficiently for the benefit of its people. Given what has been highlighted now, the broader plan for the continent, but also ensuring that it filters down to regions, what examples should we be learning perhaps from areas on the continent, perhaps like the East African communities of country? And is that a good example of a region which has a country like Kenya, which has adopted OGP principles and policies that we can perhaps implement onto the rest of the continent?
It is, we only have 9 countries in Africa out of 54 countries.
9 or 10, correct.
9 out of 54. So it seems like 45 countries in Africa are run by governments which are not interested in openness, which is really something very unfortunate. It's the lowest ratio in any place. Now, it is a voluntary scheme. We cannot force governments to join. It is governments which are serious about reform and about openness which join. And that is really, I think, is a bad statement about the state of governance in Africa. And as you know, we have a lot of presidents who want to rule for life. You have Central Africa, it's just gone crazy. And, you just wonder what's going on here.
Maybe they'll quit in 2063.
We'll leave it on that note and come back, because we do have to go to a quick ad break. But when we do come back, we'll take a look at, again, implementation, which is something which is key. We can have all these plans which look fantastic on paper, but unless they are implemented appropriately and we monitor the implementation thereof, all of this will be fruitless. But do stay with us. We're going to take a quick ad break, but ensure that you return and continue to participate with us on social media platforms. The hashtag to use once more is OGP Africa 2016. We'll see you after the break. Welcome back. You're still watching the special broadcast to you on CNBC Africa with regard to the Open Government partnerships. Well, earlier on, just before we took the ad break, we certainly had a robust discussion with regard to the synergy with regard to plans and ensuring that they do reach the man on the street. But implementation as well as accountability is certainly something that sits quite high on the table when it does come to OGP, together with some of the other plans that we have on the continent in order to reach sustainable development as well as freedom of movement of people over the years. Dr. Mo Ibrahim, I'd like to come to you here because perhaps many might allude to the Panama Papers, which were released not too long ago, which certainly showed the concerns regarding illicit financial flows and how these important and critical resources are stolen away from addressing the fundamental needs of individuals on the continent and elsewhere in the world. Given that we have so far approximately 9 or 10 African states who have adopted OGP, is this not a prime opportunity to take a stance and perhaps show the world how serious we are about addressing issues regarding corruption as well as illicit financial flows by keeping OGP principles at the center of it all? Dr. Ibrahim, Mo Ibrahim?
Yes, no, thank you. That is really very important. I don't know people here are aware of the issue of illicit financial flows out of Africa. Your own president, ex-president Mbeki, wrote an interesting report for the African Union about the illicit financial flows of Africa. Then Global Integrity published some very interesting numbers. Are you aware that the amount of illicit flows out of Africa is more than double the total amount of aid, developmental or humanitarian aids Africa receives? And we say, what's going on? So money is just leaving Africa illicitly. It's a huge tsunami going out of Africa. And that needs to stop because this is your money which has been stolen. And that is something very important. At the heart of this, 2 or 3 very simple issues. Of course, one is the issue of mispricing. And that issue needs to be really addressed, mispricing. If I'm a businessman and I'm importing this glass, I'm paying $1 for it, I say no, I pay $2 to be able to get $2 out, and then I sell it for $3. You can see how much money I make. That is something can be dealt with if you have really a diligent and efficient customs officials and really clear understanding of what is pricing, etc. But what's most important, if I am a thief and I did this sort of thing, where I'm gonna stash this extra dollar away, I'll have to keep it in a confidential place where nobody can track it. If I'm a corrupt politician, where am I gonna keep my bribes? I'm gonna keep it in anonymous company, trustee companies. Are you aware that there's a class of companies which is anonymous? Nobody knows who is the beneficial owner of these companies. This is where trillions of dollars are stashed. These are money stolen from people by criminals, drug dealers, corrupt politicians, and corrupt business people. And it is only natural we ask for an end to this class of companies. Beneficial ownership of companies must be open to everybody. Open register, because if I own this, legitimate business cannot hide behind anonymous companies because you have to appear in your balance sheet. So who needs? What is the need, social, economic, or business need for anonymous companies? There is none. And we call on all our politicians really to be good enough, patriotic enough, decent enough to stop this stolen money from leaving our countries. We need clarity here. So I hope all African countries which members of OGP or even not members of OGP join the fight to really stop this flow of illicit funds. There's going to be a big meeting in London on the 11th and 12th of this May, in just a few days, where UK was very interestingly leading the charge here to ban this class of companies. And we ask everybody really to join that. And you need to ask your governments here, why do we have that? Who is interested in that? Is my leader corrupt? That's why they doesn't want to create the necessary legislation? There's no other reason.
What about the role of the private sector in
Sorry?
that regard? Because the role of the private sector in that regard, because certainly the government might not be able to work alone with regard to these particular issues. The private sector, there should be some stakeholders representing that particular fraternity. What role do they play in also re-emphasizing OGP principles?
Yeah, but we have to understand that this is a partnership. Governments need to do their job because private sector cannot legislate. I wish I have the pen be able to legislate and sign a law. I don't have that. Okay, I'm just a citizen. It is the government, the elected government of the country, which has the ability to legislate. We need legislation. Private sector also required to observe good governance. Good governance cannot only be practiced by government, but also, I mean, I belong to a group of business people who is called B Team. And we insist that business is a force for good. Business is not evil. We have some corrupt business people, some bad apples, but business creates jobs, creates prosperity. But we say business needs to put profit, people, and planet at the core of its objectives, because without profit, there's no business. But guess what? Without people, people are our employees and our customers. Without those guys, you don't have business. Environment. If we don't have a planet, we don't have a business.
To allow your colleague to participate further. Thank you so much.
Just
Dr.
one precision, 75% of these illicit financial flows are coming from multinationals, fundamentally in extractive industries. So it has to be said.
I'm glad that you did bring that up, because also we do know that this also needs to go down to, again, to civil society members who need to participate and also drive the agenda to ensure that they bring this kind of information to the fore. This makes me come to you, Nena, to get further clarity as to how you believe civil society participants can also play a role in bringing this kind of information to the fore.
Would we have, like Advocate Lakula was saying, would we have the right to the contracting documents? Because the role of the civil society is that of a watchdog. First of all, if we don't have access rights, there is no open data, then we cannot question what is happening. There is something called open contracting data standards that we think is very important for everyone here. There is something called International Open Data Charter, which I think no African country has adopted so far. It's just a set of principles to say, because we might be here speaking about open government and open data, but implementation is a different thing. So in the extractive mines, if our governments do not tell us to whom a concession was given, if citizens do not know under what conditions a contract was awarded, where is the mayor of Cape Town? God bless you. If we don't have that open information, how do you want us to question results at the end? So the role of the civil society in this is to request data, is to ask for right to information, and to do our own job as well. We have gone beyond the emotional civil society. We need the expertise-based civil society. I am trained in international relations and law. I can analyze documents, but I am not a budget professional. We need budget professionals within the civil society. We need extractive professionals within the civil society, so that when the government gives us space, mind you, civic space is still missing in many places, but when that civic space is opened, then we can come with intellectually sound advice for government. That is key. One thing is that we also need to tell the positive stories. Madam Minister, I have no problem with South Africa giving visa or not. I have a problem with the process. I don't want to waste time. What I want is to say, this is good in this place, this is good in this place. And we are the ones to tell positive stories of ourselves. Stories of openness, stories of agility, stories of participation, stories of collaboration. If we are to leave no one behind, then it means that for the SDGs, we, civil society, must partner with government. Let us move away from the them and us. I don't see Africa as somewhere there and myself out there. No. When people talk about Africa, they're talking about me. And it is up to me to do my part to support my government, whether it is in Cote d'Ivoire, whether it is in Nigeria. Every single African government needs my support, and I will do that. And that's why we are here to talk about openness in data and citizen participation.
Precisely. Advocate Tlhakelo, you wanted to come in
Yeah,
there?
I just want to make two small points. The first point that I would like to make is that we have to strive towards proactive disclosure of information. Because, you know, public bodies hold information that belongs to us as the people. They're just custodians of that information. That's why they have to make that information available proactively. Secondly, I think in our strive for openness, we should not forget private bodies, because most of the public services now are in the hands of private bodies. So we have to ensure that private bodies that perform a public function have to be also put to the scrutiny. In South Africa, for instance, you find that electricity is, given by a private body. That body performs a public function. Therefore, all the standards of proactive disclosure of information have to apply to them as well.
Go ahead.
Yes, I'd like to come in and support the points that have been made by the earlier panelists. And just going back to the broader illicit flows discussion, I think it's also acknowledged that there isn't the kind of global regulatory environment that's required. Because these flows aren't just happening from within developing countries. It's from developing countries to developed countries and elsewhere. We've seen problems around that. So need for global governance that will review and regulate that. The second point that I'd like to come in on is the point of how do we ensure accountability at all times, at all levels? Because I don't think it's only accountability for government or accountability for the private sector. It's also for civil society.
Absolutely.
And we should look at that. Last point I'd want to make. As the African Development Bank, any contract that we put out, we need to put out publicly. So it's there, it's known, it goes online for a particular period of time. So as I conclude this, I want to just quote an Indian activist who many years ago said, if I hold my son accountable for the amount of money I give him to go and buy chapatis, and when he comes back, he needs to account how much did the chapati cost and how much change is there. There's nothing that stops me from holding my government accountable for the amount of money from taxpayers. But lastly, we need the private sector, the multilaterals and all multinationals to invest in Africa, and we want accountability that the resources that are there will help grow the African economy in an inclusive way. Thank you.
Exactly. Minister, I'd like to come to you because a lot of key elements have certainly been highlighted here. I'd also like to draw to some of the audience members' attention that, if I'm not mistaken, the OPG Steering Committee also declared Abidjan inactive just yesterday with regard to some concerns, Abidjan, with concerns there with regard to the operating environment of non-governmental institutions. So again, that accountability coming into the fore here. Minister, you're going to have the closing comments before we wrap up the show. Unfortunately, time pressures are not on our side. But if we get your view on the future outlook regarding the development and the adoption of OGPs for the African continent, where are we headed and how far are we at the moment?
I think that all of us, just a few countries are members now. We should continue to encourage the remaining countries to become members of the OGP, firstly. Secondly, we need to finalize our plans. As certainly South Africa will be doing the national plan, the national action plan that we submitted, and another one, and we continue to do that, ensuring that in the plan, there is encompassing almost everybody. And in this regard, I want to link this accountability to responsibility, because all of us have got to be good and responsible citizens of this continent. So it really have to then to take each one of us to make our countries and to make this continent a good continent. Not only government, but all of us, as it has been alluded to. Secondly, last point, legislation can be there, information can be there, data can be there, as it is the case in South Africa now. But its implementation is quite important. It's not only government that implements, it's all of us who must implement, and therefore, civil society, business, and every one of us have to be on the board and be responsible citizens in implementing that information and ensuring that we close all the gaps that exist at any given point.
Precisely. We do have to wrap up the conversation here, but I'd just like to see by show of hands from our panelists who believes that the glass is half full or half empty when it comes to the future outlook regarding OGPs on the African continent. Glass half empty? Any hands? Glass half full?
Yeah, full.
There we go, optimists. Optimists nonetheless on the panel. And again, implementation is key and fundamental to ensure that we do see the appropriate adoption of OGP and open government partnerships here on the African continent. To our audience that has joined us here today, we will take a few of your questions offline, but for you at home, the conversation certainly does continue on social media platforms. Continue using the hashtag OGPAfrica 2016. But I'd like to thank my panelists for joining us once more. The Honourable Minister of Environmental Affairs in the Republic of South Africa, Ms. Edna Molewa, followed by the African Development Bank Special Envoy on Gender, Mrs. Geraldine Fraser-Moleketi, the Chairperson of the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Advocate Pansy Tlakula, representing the World Wide Web Foundation of Civil Society, Ms. Nwa-kan-ma, followed by Ambassador of the Open Government Partnership, Dr. Mo Ibrahim, and the Chief Executive of NIPAD, Dr. Ibrahim Mayaki. Thank you once more for viewing this particular show, and again, continue to participate and hold each other accountable. From myself, Gugulethu Cele, and the team, we'll leave it there for today.
Thank you. Thanks for